Lejla, please tell my story. I met my husband when he became my next door neighbour. We got married when I was 17 years old, but in those days, it wasn't a young age to settle down and start a family. In fact, it was pretty normal. I suffered major sexual abuse as a child in my home, so I was eager to get married and leave. As a result of this early trauma, I suffered from bipolar and psychosis from a young age. Back in those days, mental health was not taken seriously unless you were in a crisis situation. Needless to say that an awful breakdown at the age of 16 was what allowed me to receive the correct diagnosis. Otherwise, I truly believe I would have fallen under the radar completely. My husband and I dated for a short while, and he appeared to be sweet and charming, coming from a good family. I thought I was going to live a happy, peaceful life away from the abuse that I had already suffered. I honestly was mad for him. He would say jump, and I would say how high. I did anything and everything he asked me to because I wanted to make him as happy as he initially made me. To begin with, he would always thank me and show appreciation for everything I did, almost like a parent would with a child. And there was always some kind of reward for my obedient actions. He'd always remember to pick up my prescription for my mental health needs. And every day, like clockwork, he would remind me of the exact time I needed to take my pills. He would say, I want to make sure that you never go crazy. Men in those days didn't show much emotion, so I thought I was lucky to have a husband who praised me the way he did. Little did I know that he was grooming me for all the mental abuse that I was going to experience throughout our marriage. I did notice signs of verbal abuse when the cracks appeared because I'd already experienced it as a child, but I tried to convince myself that it was okay, that he wasn't hitting me like most husbands, so I should be grateful for that at least. I want you to understand that domestic abuse back then was widely accepted. The police would never get involved in violent incidences, let alone the mental ones that no one could actually see. People would all turn a blind eye as if nothing was happening. Women were just expected to live with it. Very few of us had jobs and no financial freedom. We all had children, so we couldn't go anywhere. We all looked after the homes by cooking and cleaning. It was very tiring for us without ever having a release. My husband had complete financial control. He would give me weekly allowance for the food shop. I had to write down every single item that I bought so that he could see where the money went. And if there was ever any change, he would take it and spend it on himself. He'd say he deserved it because he was the one going out to work every day. I hated going to any family events because he would openly embarrass me in front of people we knew, and it was always at the expense of my mental health. He'd say things like, don't listen to her, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Half the time she's hallucinating like the psycho that she is. I know now that this was his way of discrediting anything I had to say about him and our life together. After a while, he started hiding my medication. When I'd asked him if he'd seen it, he would tell me that I must have misplaced it myself. I honestly believed him to begin with. I'd find it in really odd places and it made me question my sanity because I had no recollection of leaving it there in the first place. Eventually, he threw my medication away completely, saying that I was cured and that I no longer needed happy pills. I begged him not to, but he said if I couldn't stop taking the medication, then he would divorce me and take the children. I was terrified of him doing this, so I felt like I had no choice but to stop, just like he wanted me to. I could feel my mental health deteriorating. My mood was completely unstable. Some days I would clean the house from top to bottom for days on end with no sleep. And others, I'd struggle to get out of bed and dress the children for school, which are all classic signs of bipolar disorder. This made the abuse much worse, of course. The name calling never stopped. Even to this day, many decades later, the words still ring in my ear. He would call me useless and say that I was lucky to have him because who on else would want anyone as damaged and crazy as I was? I went 6 months without any medication, daily verbal and mental abuse before I finally had my biggest psychotic breakdown. This time, he called the doctors and to cut a long story short, he had me sectioned into hospital and my rights taken away. He told everyone how mentally unstable I was and made himself out to be the hero for saving me. I remember screaming at the doctors on the day that I was sectioned, saying, "This is his fault. He made me give up my medication. He's making me insane." But nobody believed me. Everybody felt sorry for him. My friends, family, they all doted on him for being such a brave husband who put up with me, a crazy wife, for all of these years. In hospital, I tried to tell anyone who would listen that I did not do this to myself. I tried to tell the doctors and the nurses that it was his fault. I tried to explain to them what he had done with my medication and for all of the years of mental abuse I had endured from him. At first, nobody believed me. Of course, why would they? My husband created this narrative for me, so why would they believe me over him? I honestly felt like I was living in some kind of bad film. He started divorce proceedings and went as far as banning my children from visiting me and applied for full custody. He masked this as concern for how much they would be traumatised by having a mother in their life who was mentally ill. I was the one who was traumatised. I missed my children so much that I knew I had to get better for them. Over time, my medication started to work again. My psychotic and bipolar episodes became less frequent until they went away. But my story about my husband never changed from the day I had arrived in that hospital until one day, one of the doctors finally started to take me seriously. I couldn't believe it. I was finally being heard. And I can't explain what this meant to me in terms of my recovery. But I was finally able to leave the hospital because of the improvement I made once this happened. When I was discharged, everybody told me that I should go back to my husband and ask him to stop the divorce proceedings. I knew that there was no way I was going back to that. So I did the exact opposite and I let the divorce continue. My children eventually started opening up about the abuse I had experienced before I went into hospital. One of them had recounted moment by moment the day when my husband threatened to leave me if I didn't give up any of my medication. Because of this, my family eventually believed me too, and with their help, I was able to get a good solicitor who helped me gain joint custody. The abuse continued for many years even after our divorce, and it was mainly done so by threats to leave and move far away with our children so I couldn't see them. So for a long time, he still had control over me because of this. Once my children were old enough, they all came to live with me as they were being mentally abused by him too. They said it was like living with a dictative bully. And it wasn't until my children chose to move in with me that everybody else in our life finally saw him for who he really was. I felt so validated. All those years I had endured of abuse and control were finally over. Many of our friends personally apologised to me for supporting him and not me. I'm 60 years old now and I've watched my children grow up and have families of their own, and I have the most amazing grandchildren. I got remarried in my late 40s. I went to school and studied to become a midwife. In the hospital that I work in, I'm specifically appointed to support mothers with their mental health needs. And even though I'm much older than a lot of them, I try my best every day to be the help that I once needed. I wouldn't change my job for the world. The fulfillment it brings me is unexplainable, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with myself when it's my time to retire. One final thing that I want to say to all the young women listening to this: please take heed of my story. Even though this happened to me in a different time, the facts remain that my ex-husband didn't lay a finger on me once, and he didn't have to. His mental abuse was enough to destroy me for a very long time. So please, ladies, don't ignore red flags. Please get help and get out. Please be kind to yourselves. And please remember that your story matters.